What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and this will be the first of many of our Diablo 4 Theorycraft builds. Today we've got the Overpowered Werebear build. Now this is going to be one that's absolutely devastating by the time we get to Endgame, but trust me when I say Druid is going to be a frustrating leveling experience. Sadly enough, it is going to have the least damage out of pretty much all the classes in the beginning. There may be some ways to kind of finagle some decent damage out of it in the beginning if you're solo, but when it comes to group play, trust me, your damage is going to be pretty wet noodly. It's pretty sad, but you're going to be extremely tanky, and you can benefit some of your teammates at the same point. I would highly suggest, if you got a buddy out there that's running that rogue, that necro, or that sorcerer, join up with them for the leveling process. You're going to be able to provide them with damage reduction and be able to phase tank the bosses and other things in order to give them some time to really dish out that DPS, and it's overall going to be a better experience for you. But what we're going to do today, each day until, the launch of Diablo 4, we're going to be pumping out some of these Theorycraft videos. There's a lot of different builds out there, and Druid arguably is going to have one of the most diverse build diversities out of each one of the classes. But we're going to jump into the skill tree, talk about the Werebear build here, how we can get the maximum tankiness out of it, and see how it actually ends up being extremely strong when it comes to the DPS and overall survivability at that end game point when it comes to the skill tree, combined with the legendary aspects that we know of that are going to make this class, or this build specifically for this class, extremely powerful. And one of those that's more than likely going to be S tier when it comes to the late game content, higher world tiers, and overall nightmare dungeons, where we're going to be looking for the best gear drops. But that being said, let's jump straight into that skill tree. Now, the first skill that we're going to be talking about is Maul. Now, I know a lot of people might scoff at this. It's a pretty slow ability, but trust me, we've got legendary aspects that can increase our attack speed to get this up to par, and at the same time, we've got a skill within the skill tree as well that gives us even more of that attack speed. Now, it may be slow, but the biggest thing about Maul is, one, we're going to be in the Werebear form, and while we're in the Werebear form, we're going to gain even more damage reduction. But at the same time, with Enhanced Maul, each time that we hit with the Maul, we're going to be gaining 2% of our base life as Fortify. Fortify is going to be one of the biggest things that not only increases our DPS output, but gives us damage reduction. Now, if you don't know what Fortify is, essentially, it's almost like a barrier. Over your health bar, there'll be a different colored red health bar that starts stacking up as you get Fortify. Now, Fortify gives us essentially a 10% flat damage reduction. Now, it will only give you a 10% damage reduction for the amount of health that it's covering. So say if we had 50% Fortify, but we had 100% health, the first 50% of our health is not going to have a 10% damage reduction. It'll only give us that 10% damage reduction by the time it reaches the point of where Fortify is. But trust me, with this build, I've utilized as much of the Fortify increase as we can possibly maintain as quick as possible, so we should be hitting 100% Fortify as often as we possibly can. That way, not only are we going to have that maximum damage reduction, but we're going to have the maximum DPS output that we can possibly have with this build. And one thing to also note is that Fortify will decay, much like our Spirit or Fury from Barbarian. So that's why we constantly have to have some of these skills just gaining Fortify as much as possible, and that's why Maul ends up being pretty strong for this. Now, you could argue that the Earth skill Fortify, as long as we're able to stun, but that one is only based on stunning. We have to hit a stunned enemy to gain that 4% base life, but that is another route if you're looking to find some different aspects to this. I will have a link to this build down in the description, or this website as well, if you want to start tinkering with certain things and looking at other things as we're going along. But by all means, we'll keep moving on here. Now, we've got Wild Maul right after that. This is one of those that just kind of is my personal, I really enjoy this. It's kind of comedic for me when you knock down by 20%. It's almost like a little stun lock move, but at the same time, it can be beneficial. Every 20% of the time, if we're facing off with a boss unit, this is the only way that we're generating spirit. So anytime that does proc, that's going to be something that staggers that boss. If you don't know what that means, below the boss's health bar, there's like a little yellow-orange bar that is essentially a stagger bar. So any of those moves that would possibly slow an enemy or immobilize them, stun them, that will basically hit a stagger amount to that boss unit, and by the time it reaches the maxed out point, that boss will actually knock down to the ground, and you'll have about 5 or so seconds in order to just lay in with that DPS without it being able to do anything, without it being able to move or even attack. It's actually really beneficial, and that is something that can help you along the way when it comes to utilizing Maul. It's something that could be beneficial in the late game or in the long term. But at the same time, you could take this point off and throw it somewhere else later on. But at the beginning, it can be beneficial. Moving on to the core skills, though. Now, Pulverize is going to be our main skill for our DPS. This is going to be a little bit of an AoE damage. We'll basically slam on the ground, dealing 70% damage, but the big reason that it's going to be so powerful is not only is it another form that just gives us that Werebear, but we'll be able to utilize Overpower with this. Now, Overpower is a skill, or is basically like a critical hit. Every single one of the classes can have Overpower proc, but only the Druid, the Barbarian, and the Necro can guarantee an Overpower strike. Essentially, it's like a crit, but it's not a crit. You'll notice it come up as like blue numbers. It'll have the same, almost like that of a critical hit. It'll look like it is when it strikes, but you can also have a critical Overpower strike, which is basically like double the damage. But the damage that comes from Overpower and the way that it multiplies is basically based on your maximum health that you have at that time multiplied by your maximum Fortify at that time. So as long as we have max health and max Fortify, we are maximizing the Overpower damage we can gain out of this. Now this says every 12 seconds while you remain healthy. Healthy is essentially anything above 90% of your maximum health. Anything below 90% of your maximum health is considered unhealthy. Now one thing to note about this, if you did play Druid in the beta and not the server slam, and you utilized this skill and tried to use this, it disappeared in the beta, but when it came to the server slam, even if I got knocked unhealthy, it wouldn't disappear that, or it wouldn't essentially zero out the timer that we had up there going up to the 12 seconds. So effectively, there were certain moments when you were inside of the beta before the server slam where, say, I got to 11 seconds and then I got struck down to unhealthy, it would completely delete the timer. I'd have to wait another 12 seconds. When it came to the server slam, if I hit 11 seconds and went unhealthy, it would stay down there as 11 seconds, and as soon as I went back healthy, I'd just have to wait one more second, and then I could proc Overpower again. So that's one thing to keynote about that. As long as we can maintain 90% health, which is going to be pretty easy with this build, everything that we have when it comes to damage reduction, gaining health back from some of our strikes, and fortifying ourselves, it's going to be extremely powerful. Now, the thing after that is kind of one of those moments where you can't go wrong with either one of these passive points for Pulverize. It's more about, do you want more damage? Considering I'm going with Raging Pulverize, which is every time, since we're guaranteed Overpower, we're going to stun the targets for 2 seconds. This is something that can be pretty beneficial against boss units, as it's another thing that'll gain that stagger damage onto the boss unit. But if you're looking for something that's just going to be a bit more tanky and reduce that damage output to not only yourself but everybody on the team, Primal Pulverize is going to be the one that every single time you're hitting one of these enemies, they're dealing 20% reduced damage for 4 seconds. And you're going to be able to utilize that Pulverize every 4 seconds, if not faster sometimes. So you can maintain that 20% damage reduction a lot. In late game, this might be the better choice, but for right now, until we get into the game itself, I'm going to go with the stun, just so it's maximizing more damage for the rest of the team, considering there's a lot of skill points on the other classes that increase their damage output to any target that's stunned. It's just one of those CC moments. But if you're looking for something that's a bit more tanky, Primal Pulverize is going to do just fine, and more than likely going to be great for those higher tiers, or world tiers, and once we get into Nightmare Dungeons. Now, just after that, we've got 4 points right here. Now, if you're leveling, or when you're leveling, I wouldn't say that you have to go for each one of these 4 points. I'd say put 1 point into Heart of the Wild, and then start filling in Wild Impulse until you can get down to the defensive points. But let's talk about these 4 points before we move on. Essentially, what we're going for with Wild Impulse is just flat increasing our core skill damage. It's going to cost us 9% more spirit, but we're dealing 15% increased damage. Now, this is something that's just going to flat increase our overpower damage as well as just giving us even more damage with that core skill every time that we're striking, even when we don't have overpower available. Now, just underneath that, we've got Predatory Instinct. Critical strike chances increased by 6% anytime we're against close enemies. Now, there's no range skills with this, so with that Werebear, we're always going to be in the face mauling those enemies. So no matter what, we're going to have an increase of 6% for our critical strike chance. This is going to help us with possibly critting with Overpower as well, but the rest of the time just amplifying our ability to deal a little bit more damage in certain moments. Now, just after that, Iron Fur is going to be the one you want to go for before you fill out the Predatory Instinct, as this is going to give us that 9% damage reduction while we're in Werebear form. This is just further creating more of that survivability for ourselves, and it will persist for 3 seconds after we leave Werebear form. So no worries if you have to transfer into a werewolf or you go back to human. We'll still have that for a few moments before we get back into our Werebear form. Or if you're just chasing down an enemy and you just lose the Werebear shapeshift. Now, moving on to the defensive skills. The first skill that you're going to want to grab up while you're leveling is Debilitating Roar. Arguably, this is one of the strongest skills within the Druid skill tree and one of the strongest defensive skills within all of the classes. With Debilitating Roar, we're essentially gaining a 70% damage reduction to all enemies that this is affecting, not only for yourself, but the rest of your team as well for 4 seconds. I mean, the only thing that would make this even more powerful is if it was something that also taunted the enemies. I would love that, but, you know, let's keep it where it is right now so we don't get any nerfs on this, but that would be fantastic if there was a legendary out there that could make this actually taunt. Now, there is a legendary that affects this for werewolf when it comes to poison damage and rabies, but we'll talk about that in a different build. Now, just after that, though, we will have Enhanced Debilitating Roar. We're going to be fortifying for 22% of our base life. Another one of those moments where we're able to capitalize on really fully increasing our fortify on our health bar and just maximizing that damage in the long run, as well as that survivability through damage reduction. But Debilitating Roar gets even better. Innate Debilitating Roar also slows all these enemies by 65%. So not only you got 70% damage reduction for everybody, but they're also slower moving, easier hitting targets. It just gets ridiculous. And since it's a CC, it's another one of those moments where you're basically reducing their damage dealt and increasing the amount of damage you can deal to them based around, or essentially for the rest of your team that have that damage or increased damage for any type of crowd control effect, or just slow in general. Now, the other side of that is Debilitating Roar also heals you for 4% of your maximum life each second for its duration. This isn't bad, but I would argue that 65% slow for 4 seconds is way better than just gaining a little bit of, or essentially 4 times 4, we got 16% maximum health. Right next to it, we've got Bloodhowl. We're going to be gaining 20% of our maximum life, so that's going to be one of those things that I don't think is going to be better. I'd probably test it. I'll test it out while I'm in game once we get to the full game, but more than likely, the slow is going to be the better of the two options. Now, beyond that point, it's going to be up to you which one you want to throw in for. I would argue that while you're leveling, Earthen Bulwark is the one that you want to go for next, considering it's just going to give us another one of those barrier moments for 3 seconds. We've got the ability to absorb 45% of our base life and damage, but right after that, we also gain Unstoppable with this. If you don't know what Unstoppable means, is essentially anytime that you would be crowd controlled, whether you'd be slowed, frozen, stunned, knocked down, as soon as you pop this ability, you'll be able to break free from that without having to wait the full timer or take that next bit of damage, and you should be able to move freely through enemies with Unstoppable. Now, right after that as well, though, we will be gaining 18% base life to fortify. Trust me, we're going to have another a skill point down later on that's going to further increase the amount we gain from these different skills when we utilize gaining that fortify. So gaining 100% fortify, again, survivability is going to be extremely strong with this, and that DPS output just keeps going up. Now, next to that, Bloodhowl. This is going to be something that's going to be helpful for just maintaining our actual maximum life, or maintaining our base life as we're going through, just in case either we run out of health pots, or at the same time just maintaining a decent amount of health, or healthy at any given time. Now, I wouldn't say put any more points than one into this. You won't even make it to 30% maximum life. I think 28% was the max that went out with 5 skill points. Not going to be worth it. 20 is plenty, considering the fact that the first skill point right after that, the first passive is kills reduce the cooldown of Bloodhound by 1 second. So we're going to be able to pop this pretty often. There's going to be moments since Pulverizes and AoE, and if we can wait until that overpower moment, and you've got a nice juicy little pack right there, you could be killing 10 of them, and instantly this is just like a 5-second cooldown, if not almost instantly able to proc it again as soon as that happens. I've had multiple times where I was able to just mow through some of these and utilize this skill 3 times in a row within a matter of 8 seconds. So that's 60% of our maximum life we just gained back in about 6 seconds. Quite ridiculous, but gets better. Right after that, we've also got Preserving Bloodhound. Will also gain another 15% increase to our attack speed for 4 seconds, helping with that resource generation from Maul, and just making sure that we're able to strike pretty quickly with that to not only gain that resource generation, but also increase our Fortify at the same time. Now, right after we get all 3 of these, I wouldn't say immediately go up to 5 with this. You know, it's going to be a long cooldown, 22 seconds, you know. Putting 1 point wouldn't be too bad if you just need one to keep moving down until we make it down to here to trample. But the reason I went in 5 points with this is just to reduce the cooldown as much as possible so I can constantly proc this, because this is arguably the better one of the 3. This is the one that we constantly want, especially when it comes to late game. If we can just give everybody the ability to take some of that damage, because it's going to happen as soon as we get into nightmare dungeons. You all know how those pylons are going to be going, how much damage some of these elites that are just bulked up with different modifiers or whatever the modifiers are on those dungeons. 70% damage reduction is going to be an absolute necessary. It's going to get real frustrating out there. We already know what's going to happen, but this is just going to help out as much as possible with that. But over to our left, I wouldn't say you want to put points into these 2 unless you need to put some points in and just get some damage reduction early before we move on to getting trampled down here. But with Ancestral Fortitude, we'll be gaining 15% to non-physical resistances. So anything that's like elemental damage, we're gaining 15% resistance to that. That's going to be like one of those resist-alls in a way. But right next to that as well, Vigilance. Goodness, dyslexia over here. But we'll gain 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds after using any one of these defensive skills. So each one of these 3, 6 seconds after, we're going to have another 15% damage reduction. I mean, with Debilitating Roar, we're already up to 85%. We've got the 9% on top of that. I mean, it's starting to get close to that 100%. I mean, if we threw in the Primal Pulverize, we're at 100%. We'll basically be immune to some of this damage. Now, I don't know whether or not it's actually going to be a guaranteed 100%. We'll have to test that out as soon as we get into the game. But for some moments, there may be 4 seconds where we're basically invulnerable utilizing these skills. But moving on from that point, again, I'd say you don't need to throw your points into these immediately unless you're just trying to be as tanky as possible and you want to do that before you gain even more damage. But by the time we're able to unlock the, what is this one? I can't remember what this one's called. It's just Wrath. I guess that's what it's called, Wrath. Once we get to the Wrath portion of the skill tree, we're not going to utilize any of the companions for the Werebear. If only there was a legendary that turned these werewolves in, or these wolves into werebears. That'd be amazing. I'd love that. Or if there was a unique out there, I'd definitely be throwing that in. But Trample is going to be our last skill that we'll want to unlock for this build. It's going to be extremely powerful. It's going to be another one of those that gives us not only mobility, but unstoppable at the same time. And it actually gives a good bit of damage. Considering right after we put 1 point into Trample, Enhanced Trample now deals 150% bonus damage, and that bonus is reduced only by 50% for each enemy hit after the first. So the first 3 are going to have a massive increase to damage. That first one especially is going to hit pretty hard. And as we further increase our damage, it's just going to get pretty ridiculous. And here in a moment, we'll showcase how we'll be able to overpower this skill as well. But right after that, again, Natural Trample. Casting Trample, we gain 20% base life as Fortify. Again, further increasing our ability to really maximize that Fortify up to 100% as quick as possible, giving us that survivability. But right after that, we've got Mending. This is going to be something that just further increases the healing we receive while we're in Werebear form. Now, when you're leveling, I would say just put 1 point into this. This is something that once we've filled out down to the bottom of the skill tree, we'll work our way back up and start filling these in with the remaining points. But as you're leveling. If you can't make it all the way down here to the ultimate or the can't remember what the name of that is, but by the very bottom, I'd say just put 1 point into that and then throw as many points as you can into this before we can move into the ultimate territory, which is going to be provocation, which is going to be our second way that we can actually utilize overpower as a guaranteed. So whenever we remain in Werebear, if you put 1 point into this, it'll be about 30 seconds, I believe, but all 3 points every 20 seconds we'll be able to use our next skill as an overpower. So this is something that you can actually combine with trample with that 150% damage increase. Could be pretty devastating, but at the same time you'll still be able to utilize it with pulverize as well if you wanted to do it in that manner. So no matter what, we've got 2 ways that we can actually utilize overpower here, and these are going to be our 2 strikes. So every 12 seconds and then 8 seconds after that, boom, we'll be able to have another of those devastating strikes as the other one's constantly rotating back up as long as we're healthy. But going forward, once we get to the ultimate territory, the first one you want to go for is quick shift. Whenever we shapeshift into any other form, we're essentially going to gain 15% flat damage increase as well. So going back and forth between the werewolf or the werebear, every time that we go into it, we're just going to have that flat 15% increase of damage as long as we're in that shapeshifted form. Now, just after that, we've got heightened senses. So upon shapeshifting into a werewolf or a werebear, we gain 12% damage reduction against elites for 5 seconds. So since we're utilizing Bloodhowl with the werebear forms, we're constantly bouncing back and forth. So we'll be able to maintain this stack of 5 seconds of damage reduction against elites and be able to just phase tank them. But by the time we've filled in these points, we'll also be able to get Ursun's strength. We gain 20% additional maximum life, something that's not only going to give us more of that tankiness, more of that survivability, but maximum life equals more damage with overpower. Now, on top of that, while we're healthy, since we're maintaining healthy at all times anyways, just to utilize the overpower, we've got another flat 30% increase to our damage. Gets absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we're not even done just yet. And before we move on to the gear is where it starts to get ridiculous. Some of these legendary aspects that amplify the damage and start mixing and matching some of the skills when it comes to earth skills and utilizing different types of damage. It gets ridiculous. But defensive posture is going to be the last thing that we want to put points into. It increases the amount of fortify we gain from all sources by 15%. So from our maul, from all of our skills, we're gaining an additional 15% of that fortify, further maximizing that 100% gain on it, creating that survivability and maximizing our DPS output. Now, that's going to be it for the skill tree right here. If you're going for the leveling process, making it all the way to the bottom of the skill tree is what I would say is your ultimate path, and then work your way back up and start filling in some of these points to a maximum of 3. I would say quick shift is one that I would probably put 3 points into before anything, before I'd even do damage reduction to elites or fortify. This may be something that may benefit you more. Maybe you're not getting as much fortify as you'd like. I personally was constantly having the ability, even just at level 20 within the server slam, being able to get 100% fortify pretty quickly. It should be even faster now with these abilities, and if we had defensive posture. But at that same point, filling in, mending, and if you'd like to, arguably, you can throw the points out of Debilitating Roar if you're fine with the cooldown being 22 seconds or just 20 seconds. If you put 1 point into that, you could throw those points into something else like basic skill, generate 6% more spirit. You could throw it into Trample for just more maximum damage. This can get up to over 100%, I believe, 108% maximum damage, and have that increase by 150%. Or you could possibly throw it into shapeshifting fortifies. So anytime that we're shapeshifting, you gain additional fortify as the base life that could be increased by defensive posture. There's a lot of different ways to go with this when it comes to the skill tree, but at an end point, we need to move on to the legendary aspects now. Now, I basically filled this out for us so we can easily just kind of move along the line and start showcasing some of those legendary aspects you're going to be looking for as you're leveling, things that are just going to make this ridiculously overpowered. And we're going to start off with the Skinwalker's aspect. When you use a shapeshift skill, if you change form, you gain X amount of life. So not only is every time that we're shapeshifting, we're gaining maximum life, but if we've already got full life, we gain that same amount as fortify, just further building into the fortify or the maximum or maintaining healthy and survivability with Fortify. Up next, we've got the aspect of Quicksand. Now, damage from Earth skills slow enemies hit by 25 to 50% for 5 seconds. Now, this may seem a little bit confusing considering everything we've been using as a Werebear ability, but this is where it starts to change it up. Aspect of the Trampled Earth. Trample now summons 6 landslide pillars of Earth during its duration that deals 70 to 80% normal damage. Trample is now also a nature magic and Earth skill. Now the same thing happens with aspect of the Earth and Horror. Pulverize is now also an Earth skill. So not only is it still a Werebear skill, but it's also an Earth skill now. So now every time that we're hitting with either one of these abilities, we're also slowing them, and it's considered an Earth skill at the same time. And each one of them now also adds further damage on top of what their damage already is. Now, aspect of the might, or the might, this is just going to be something that gives us further of that damage reduction for basic skills. Anytime that we're mauling something, we've got 20% additional damage reduction. So if we're phase tanking that boss unit, we still got enough damage reduction to make sure that we can take a couple of hits and then move around and then keep mauling. But right after that, ballistic aspect. This is just going to make it even better. Anytime that we have Fortify Earth skills gain 2% rank, like we just covered, Trample and our Pulverize are just both going to be an Earth skill now, and they're going to have +2 to their ranks. No matter what, we're always going to have Fortify. We're going to be utilizing Maul, so no matter what, we're always going to have at least 2% of that Fortify. So no matter what, we're further increasing the damage of both of these skills. It's ridiculous. Now, I will say, with this build, we're going to want to have a one-handed weapon with an offhand. You don't want to be using a two-handed weapon unless there's just some unique out there that just further increases the attack speed, makes up for those moments. But at the same time, we've got accelerating aspect for the offhand right here, where critical strikes with core skills increase our attack speed by 15 to 25%. Another one of those that's going to just further help us out with Maul and how slow it's just attacking. But going up from there, our core skills deal 20 to 40% increased damage based on the amount of Fortify. Now, I'm not really sure with the wording on this one, whether or not it's one of those moments where, say, if this was 30% increased damage, would we only need 30% Fortify in order to make that maximum 30% increase to damage, or would we need more than that? I'm going to assume that it means whatever the percentage is increased by damage is the percentage we need of Fortify in order to have that increase of damage. So we'll see once that comes into the full game how that's actually working out, but that's definitely something that's going to synergize really well with the fact that we're just maximizing Fortify at all times. Rapid aspect, we're going to be able to unlock this one from the dry steps. We're going to want to... But let me move real quick. Basic skills. Gain 15 to 30% attack speed. Just going to help us out with that Maul. Again, that's going to be something that just helps us overall with how slow that is. And then, goodness. I wish this was... Alright. And then this one. The duration... Okay, aspect of Mending Stone. The duration of Earthen Bulwark is increased by 6 seconds. So before it was just 3 seconds with the Earthen Bulwark. This is the one that creates the barrier for the base life of 45%. With this now, we're actually going to gain an additional 6 seconds on top of the 3 seconds that it already has. So we'll have that for a duration of 9 seconds as long as it doesn't get destroyed or we go over the base of 45% absorbed damage. And in the addition of killing an enemy with Earth skills, since we're utilizing Trample and Pulverize now as an Earth skill, it replenishes our active Earthen Bulwarks barrier. So even if we're diminishing that barrier, if we're getting kills at the same time, we're refilling it and we're able to maximize it and utilize it for the full 9 seconds. But that also means for those 9 seconds, we're unstoppable. That is extremely powerful. Now, when it comes down to the gems, the ruby is going to be the one we want for the weapon, considering that's just going to give us a flat increase to overpowered damage. Now, this is not even the maximum gem right here, so that's 24% right there, just base. So I don't know how much percentage we're going to get by the end point of whatever the maximum ruby is, but that's already ridiculous in my opinion. Next, coming up over that, we've got the sapphire, which we want in our armor pieces. This is going to be a 3% damage reduction while we're fortified, so we're further increasing the amount of damage reduction we have from fortified. Again, this isn't the maximum level for the Sapphire, so you can see how much more damage reduction we can get. Now we're basically at 13% damage reduction for every bit of fortify we have on us. Then after that, when it comes to the last gems that go into the jewelry, this is going to be based on whatever you're fighting. I'd say in general, you can't go wrong with a diamond considering it's just resistance to all. But say we have one of those moments where you're facing off with something like the world boss Shava, you'd want the emeralds in there considering he's dealing a lot of poison resistance. So in those moments, you're going to be going to the jeweler and popping these in and out just to make sure that you have the right damage resistance for the certain fight that you're going for, if you know what you're going to have beforehand. Say if we had something with the nightmare dungeons, if we know the modifier is going in, maybe there's like a rotating one per week if that's something that might go down. If we know the damage type that's going to be in there, that'd be something that would help us. Or possibly if we're still able to socket the gems once we go into the actual nightmare dungeon, we could hold on to these gems, just have them unsocketed before we go in, and then we'll find out the modifier. And if we're able to slot them in, that'd be a great way to get that done. Just have them ready for whatever modifier you may walk into by the time you walk in if you don't know what it is before we actually get in there. But in general, diamond's probably going to be the best one suited for us. Now, the last thing that we need to talk about are spirit boons. Now, the thing to know about these is we have 4 different aspects per one of these. We've got the deer, the eagle, the wolf, and the snake. Each one of them has different modifiers that we can select one of. Now, we can select 2 from only one of them. It doesn't mean you just have to use the eagle. If you like 2 from the snake, you can do 2 from that one, but only one of them can we choose 2 aspects. Now for me, when it came to the deer, I went with wariness to where we take 10% reduced damage from elites. When it came to the eagle, I went for 10% maximum life increase and 10% attack speed. Just flat out damage for us. That's probably going to be better off. Whereas a lot of people are probably going to put 2 into eagle for the 5% increase to critical strike chance and 30% increase to critical strike damage. For other druid builds, I would suggest that more than this, but since we're utilizing Maul and since we're utilizing Overpower, maximum life is going to give us more damage over time, and attack speed is just going to give us that generation to further increase our DPS more than it would be. Well, who knows? We might trade off attack speed for critical strike chance at some point. I'll have to test it once we get in there, but for right now, I believe maximum life and attack speed is going to go better for this build specifically. But right after that, fortify for 10% of your maximum life when you use a defensive skill. We've got 3 defensive skills, so yet again, we've got 30% more increase to that fortify. This may be something where we get to the point where we're way over 100%. That's when I'm going to start changing out some of these points. Like I said, this is theory craft. You know, there's going to be certain things once we get into the full launch of the game where on paper, this is what we wanted, but when it comes to the actual gameplay, it may work a little bit different. So we got to tweak it here and there to kind of move some of these points around. But right after that, this is where we get our 3rd capable guaranteed overpower. Every time we kill the 10th person with an Earth skill, which we're basically only going to be killing with the trample or the pulverize, we'll have another, or our next Earth skill will overpower, which if we have those 2 legendaries, boom, those, or trample and pulverize are both going to have the capability of overpowering by a 3rd time. It's going to be pretty ridiculous. Now, if we don't have those 2 legendaries or one of those 2 legendaries, we might have to go for critical strikes with shape-shifting skills, heal for your maximum life. That's going to be the thing that I would switch off if you don't have one of those 2 legendaries, because otherwise we don't have any Earth skills. If we don't have that legendary making that act as an Earth skill, then this basically becomes useless. So in that instance, I would go with the masochist, maybe? I don't know. I'm not sure how to say that one, but critical strikes, heal for 30% maximum life would be the better option if we don't have that legendary to increase that one. But alright guys, that's going to be the overpowered Werebear build for the Druid. This is, we could go into Paragon, but I felt this is something that would be better suited for once we're actually in the game. I mean, we're already up to almost 40 minutes with this video. I'm not trying to take up too much of your time. I'm going to leave a link down in the description below so you can go over and just check this build out yourself. It'll be already ready for you to actually work with, and then you can push into the Paragon tree if you want to. There's some cool stuff in there. I'm still unsure about it. I don't know where they got these Paragon boards. For me personally, it's kind of like, you know, I like looking at it, but I don't know whether or not it's actually going to be true to the final version of the game. If this is just something that was data mined from previous versions, you know, it's all a bit confusing to me. But at the same time, it's something I feel, since I'm basically going to be doing another video on these later on, that's something I'll talk about further once we're actually deep into that Paragon board itself and I can actually feel the raw damage from it. Because I'm not trying to just eat up every bit of your time. But on that note, hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this is something that'll help you. We're going to be pumping out these build videos every day going up to the Diablo 4 launch. Subscribe if you want more of that Diablo 4 content, if you enjoyed this. And if you're looking to catch Diablo 4 on launch day, or technically the early release launch day, we got June 1st, 6 p.m. I'm rolling in 24-hour stream. If you want to head over and follow that, or follow me over at Twitch to catch that 24-hour stream, we're going for 50 within the first 24 hours, and we're going to be doing it with Necro. It's going to be a time. I can't wait for it. You know, I don't know how many other people are as excited as I am, but I'm ready to jump into it already. I've been putting way too many hours into building these. You know, it's it's one of those moments you start thinking, yeah, I'm putting too much time into it, but at the same time, it's probably going to help a good bit of people out that don't have the same amount of time to kind of look over and see what's going to be the best combinations for some of these, or just have everything ready for themselves so that by the time they're able to get in, they're able to just roll through, have a good time, and just not have to just mess around with a bunch of different type of builds that may just end up being bricked and just boring. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and until the next video, have a good one.